Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Gemma here. And in today's video, I want to go over a thoughtful comment somebody left under my addiction, the progression of addiction video. And that comment was, let me just grab it here. How should someone approach changing addictive habits when they are currently experiencing loneliness, stress, and emotional triggers? And this is actually one of the most important questions in recovery because loneliness and stress and emotional discomfort are the exact states that addiction was regulating in the first place. So, when someone is trying to change addictive habits while those states are still active, it can kind of feel almost impossible. And there's actually an important reason for that. Like I've mentioned in many videos, the addiction isn't just attachment to a substance, it's actually attachment to a state change. And substances and behaviors become really powerful because what's happening inside us is that they're relieving the pain, they're numbing the anxiety or distracting from loneliness. Ultimately, they're shifting our internal state. And at some point, the brain learns something which is really important. This substance or this behavior regulates me. So, whenever we come up with or we are encountering emotional states such as overwhelm, stress, rejection, the brain automatically reaches for a behavior that previously created relief or automatically reaches for that substance that creates relief because the brain remembers this is how we escape. So now going into loneliness, loneliness is actually one of the strongest drivers in addictive behavior and wanting to take substances because loneliness at the end of the day, it's not about being alone. It's about a feeling of disconnection. You might be feeling unseen, misunderstood, feeling emotionally unsupported, or even just separate from other people. And I think most of all is that we are feeling disconnected from ourselves. So when that kind of disconnection exists, addictive behaviors and substances start filling that space because it becomes something that we can predict. It becomes comforting and also something that we look forward to, right? And in a strange way, well, I wouldn't really say a strange way, but the addiction becomes basically a substitute relationship. And this is like for me, for example, when I was addicted to meth and G, it was like that was my number one priority. That was, my best friend. My pipe was my best friend at that time. This is why loneliness can trigger us wanting to reach for that substance because ultimately our nervous system and our ego are looking for relief from the feeling of disconnection. Now, if you look at how stress reactivates addictive patterns or those urges, it actually works in a very similar way because when we're stressed, our nervous system is shifted into a survival state. So, this means that we have less access to perspective, impulse control, long term thinking. It actually destabilizes our prefrontal cortex. So, instead, the brain starts looking for the fastest way to regulate that discomfort. And it doesn't it's not logical, right? It doesn't ask, oh, this is the healthiest option. We automatically go to what is going to stop this feeling right now. And if historically the substance has created relief, which it has, if you've dealt with addiction, it remembers that pathway. So anytime we're under a lot of stress, that urge can come back so quickly and so powerful. And it's not because you want to sabotage that or anything. It's really just the nervous system trying to regulate itself. Now, let's move into emotional triggers. So, triggers are really misunderstood. And it's something that we're like, oh, we should never be triggered. But that's not the case. Triggers are actually your teacher. Triggers show you where actually your freedom lives. So it's not just the external event. The trigger is the emotional charge that activates the event inside of you. So to put it into a different, way of explaining is that the trigger will show you where you have old wounds, where you might be feeling rejected, unprocessed grief, abandonment issues. And when all of that intensity rises, the nervous system can feel overwhelmed. And if someone hasn't developed the capacity to hold emotional intensity, the system looks for the fastest way to escape it. And again, that brings us back to the addictive behavior, wanting to reach for that drink or that drug. So you can understand why early recovery can feel incredibly intense, because when you remove the substance, you're not just removing the substance or the habit, you remove the fastest way you know how to regulate yourself. So suddenly, all of the emotions that you've been suppressing or avoided in your addiction or your substance use, they're actually going to become more visible. So your loneliness is going to probably feel stronger. Stress will feel heavier for sure. Emotional triggers are going to feel overwhelming. And I want to reassure you that this doesn't mean that recovery is not working, because it actually is. In many ways, it means that you're finally coming into contact with what was underneath your addiction. And this is where the real healing and the real work begins. So, the real work is developing to stay with your internal experience without needing something outside of you to escape it, without needing that drink or that hit, or reaching for a partner or some external validation or reassurance, right? So putting this all together, addiction actually comes from a place where your nervous system has learned that I can't hold this state, I can't handle this state. So with recovery, we learn to build the capacity to stay with all of these states without escaping ourselves, without abandoning ourselves. And that capacity builds gradually. It's not going to happen like overnight. It's like a muscle that you work out in the gym. So if you are experiencing any kind of overwhelming emotional state, the number one thing to build your capacity is to stay with it. And how do we stay with it? I'm going to go over a few different practical things right now that we can use, or that you can use in your, day-to-day life. So number one is reframing. So the urge isn't the enemy. The first shift to understand is that the urge is just information, and it's your nervous system basically saying something inside me needs regulation. I don't feel safe in this environment. So it's not, I need this substance. It's actually something inside me needs regulation. So remember that the substance was just a tool that your brain learned to regulate a state. So when an urge appears, we need to pause and we need to ask ourselves, what is actually happening within me right now? Am I lonely? Am I feeling overwhelmed? Am I emotionally triggered? Am I exhausted? And asking yourself that actually breaks the automatic pattern. The longer we can have a pause and be the observer of our experience and actually go in with curiosity and not be afraid of the emotional state that we're experiencing, is the more that we build that muscle and that capacity internally and actually start to connect with ourselves a lot deeper. Another powerful tool that we can use is very simple, just in the moment, name the state that you're in. So, having the awareness, again, we're building the awareness. I'm feeling lonely right now. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling emotionally activated. And when we name the emotion, it activates parts of our brain that actually helps us regulate the nervous system. And again, it's creating that observer experience, and it moves from reaction into awareness. And awareness is what interrupts the addictive loops. Now, it's not going to be, easy and comfortable. Always constantly reaching for instant gratification, if that's how we've trained ourselves, it's not going to be a comfortable thing in the beginning, like any change, right? But this is where we can start building the capacity for that. Another helpful shift is understanding that urges move in waves. So, this is understanding like urge surfing. So, most urges actually peak and pass within 20 minutes if they're not acted on. So, the thing is, when someone believes that this feeling will never stop, the urge actually becomes incredibly overwhelming within our system. So, us reframing and calming ourselves and talking to us, saying this wave is going to pass. I just need to regulate myself through it. You just have to stay present long enough for the wave to actually pass. And I'll go into some actual steps on how we can do that. Another tactical step that you guys can implement is when the nervous system is activated, it's really effective to regulate the body than to argue with all of these thoughts inside your head. So, some really simple things is get out and move your body, go for a walk, get under a cold shower, do some breath work, like do a guided breath work from YouTube, step outside. And when we practice those different techniques, it really reduces the intensity of the urge. And again, it builds our capacity to handle these emotions instead of wanting to escape them. Another important shift is, like I mentioned earlier, that a good reframe to constantly remind yourself is that triggers are teachers. They expose where the emotional charge exists, where your nervous system still needs support, where healing is still required, where you still need to reparent yourself. So recovery is never going to be about never being triggered again, because I still get triggered, like not to pick up a drink or drug, but I still get overwhelming emotional states. It's just that it's really about learning how to become someone who can feel those states without automatically collapsing into an old pattern. So every time you are faced with an urge or a trigger, I need you to pause. I need you to breathe. I need you to do, some of those tactical steps. And I need you to remind yourself that you regulating yourself through this is what is making you stronger. It is rebuilding a muscle, and it is showing you exactly what needs to be healed within you. So, if you've been in recovery a while, you would have heard that we need to incorporate some new lifestyle activities, and incorporating new ways to regulate our nervous system can really help to build our capacity as well. So, that's meditation, creative expression, journaling, movement, gratitude lists, and these aren't quick fixes, but they form a new pathway to regulate your nervous system and to build that connection with self. So at the end of the day, recovery isn't about becoming someone who never feels lonely, stressed, or triggered, because even, 6, 7 years into this journey of my own, sometimes I do feel personally, like, oh, maybe I feel a bit lonely or whatever. But it's ultimately letting those emotions come up and holding yourself, regulating yourself, reframing, and being the parent that you always needed. So then you can learn how to sit with yourself instead of escaping and suppressing those feelings. So if you're trying to change addictive habits while experiencing, loneliness, stress, and emotional triggers, which is definitely going to happen, understand that those states are often the conditions that your addiction was formed around. So it's really learning how to meet those internal states in a new way instead of reaching for the drink and drug. And addiction ultimately is the attempt to escape what we don't know how to hold on our own. And recovery is the opposite of that. It's the process of learning how to stay with those states without escaping ourselves. So I hope that has helped and given you some practical takeaways for you to implement as well. If you want to explore our group and one-on-one containers, the link is below. And don't forget to give the video a like, the channel a subscribe, and please do leave any comments as well because I do read them